everyone, it's Carol here at Aakash Journals. Thank you for joining me. A couple of weeks ago I showed you some slow stitched covers that I had been working on for some embroidery projects that I wanted to bind into journals, and I said I'd come back to you and show you the actual journals themselves once they were made up. So these are the two journals now that they've been made up. Just very quickly, this is a very slim journal, 5-hole pamphlet stitch just with one signature in, and this is what the cover looks like, just as a quick reminder. This was some rust dyed fabric and some little pieces on top, and then just embroidered. So that's that one. And this is the other one. Two signatures in this one, and as you can see, 3-hole pamphlet stitch on that. So that's the embroidery that I've got on the front of this one, and if I flip it over, I've got another embroidery on the back. And this mossy bank here, if I try and turn it sideways, maybe you can see it's quite dimensionalized, so I didn't put this inside because it would make it a little bit awkward. I just popped it on the outside there. So I'm just going to do a quick flip through of these two journals just to show you what's inside. I'll do some photographs at the end. So this is the embroidery on the front of this one. If I open it up, rusted fabric inside. It's going to lean backwards a little bit, this one, because of how dimensionalized that is. And also, as you can see there, I've got a couple of lines in black. That's just Friction marker pen. I'll iron that. I'll put my iron on the top of that later on today, and those lines will disappear. So these are the little embroideries inside this one. I'm just going to tilt it so that it's not leaning back. And as I say, I'll do some photographs, close-up photographs at the end. So there we go. All the embroideries in this little journal I've mounted onto just some book page. And same as previously, what I've done is I've used caddy paper, 2 layers of it glued together, but before I glued them together I reinforced it down the centre with some tape, just so that it would be sturdier for actually stitching into my journal. And these are all done on home rusted fabrics. Got a frayed edge on that one. This is a twig out the garden. And these are French knots at the bottom here, all very loose and done like that on purpose. Just little fly stitch and little stem stitch and straight stitch there. The twigs I've wrapped, but you'll see I've used twigs throughout this journal quite a bit. And this is all satin stitch, but I've done with a variegated thread, French knots there. And these are all just straight stitch really, and this is stem stitch. And I've gone around the outside with a split back stitch. I like doing that on my embroidery pieces, almost acts as a frame. This one, there's a little Suffolk puff with a wrapped washer there, French knots there. This is just some loose textured thread, art thread that I had, so I've just stitched that on, and it's nice and loose, looks like rough grasses. Again, split back stitch around the outside, more wrap washers, bit more of that thread up there, and this is just some handmade paper that's been written on in Japanese. Going on to the second signature, it's a running stitch, and then you just loop through it, and it gives a really nice, almost a scalloped effect. There is a name for that stitch, can't remember it at the moment. It's not one I do very often, but it's very pretty. Really pleased with that one. Very much more or less the same stitches used throughout. Satin stitch, split back stitch, little tiny French knots, stem stitch and straight stitch. So easy enough for anybody to do. And more of the same on this one. I like how the white gives a pop with these little oxide daisies on this one, and I just wanted a few leaves blowing off, sorry, not leaves, petals, a few petals blowing off as if it's in the wind. More of that art thread here, another twig out the garden. The reason I've got these twigs and use those is because they all have little tiny pieces of moss on. Hope you can see that. It's dried onto the twigs and it's nice and sturdy, but for this one, rather than do overcast stitching, I've just done cross stitches up the stem. And then a bit more of the same. This one had some lace along the bottom and I just filled in the lace with some French knots. Again, more wrapped washes, love doing those. This one didn't do a split back stitch around the outside, I just did a simple running stitch. This one I haven't done anything around the outside, which is unusual. This one, obviously you can see blanket stitch here and here, French knots here, and these are French knots as well. And here I just added a piece of twine and just did blanket stitch there, and then these knots here are just little French knots in the same thread just to pick up the coloration. And then these two don't go at all with all these little abstracty ones, but I just wanted to include them. So this is obviously a bird, it's supposed to be a magpie, and I just put all the pieces together using bits of paper and then did some stitching over the top. Here I've got some stitching down at the bottom, and then these are trees that I've just cut out of book page, and then I went over the edge with a big brush marker pen, and I've stitched on the machine for this one to edge it. This one, again, this was a twig I found in the garden, loved it. I had some wool type twine in my stash, so I decided I'd stitch over it. Same thing as I did previously, just loose French knots, and it kind of gives the image or impression of snow. And then all of these are French knots, these dots here, and again, loose French knots up here and here with some of that twine. And then this is the last one, very simple collage. This is a piece of fabric on the top. I did reverse applique, so this is all cut away, and then it's all outlined with split back stitch, running stitch, as you can see. A scrap of paper, some German book text. This is stitched on the machine, and then another piece of fabric there, which I stamped on. And then again, 2 washers. And the reason I've gone for washers throughout, not only because I like doing them, but because they're picking up the washers on the cover itself. So there you can see that line again of the Friction marker pen, and that will just disappear. Just a basic wraparound cover, as you can see, nothing special. So that's the first one, and I'll do some close-up photos now for you to have a look at. And this is the second one. It's gone a bit wonky there. As I mentioned before, just one signature. Because this was a taller journal than this little one, I decided to do 5-hole pamphlet stitch. And I really like this wraparound design because I plan to add to this journal, and if you've got a wraparound cover, it gives you plenty of opportunity to add in another signature. All it does is make it so that you have less of a wraparound, but I give myself quite a generous wraparound when I do these little journals. So let's open this one up so that you can have a look at it. This is quite a moody home rusted fabric here that I've used for the lining, and I also did this little bit of weaving on some fabric which I absolutely loved doing at the time, but it's been sitting in my stash for a while now, not knowing what project I needed to add it to. When I decided to use this fabric for my inside cover, this was the perfect feature to go inside because it's a great colour match. So that's just inside there, and it is quite rough edged, but these are quite rough little journals. Again, you can see I've got my Fricks and marker pen marks here, and again they'll iron away. Just touch the iron to the outside cover and those will disappear. And because it's fabric, it's not going to do any damage at all. So the reason I chose this fabric for inside was because of this piece of fabric that this little embroidery has been done on. I thought it went well. Again, a wrapped twig here. I've wrapped round, just overcast with some variegated thread here, and then a cross stitch at the top, and there's another cross stitch underneath there to hold it in place. This is backed onto just some rough scrap of paper, then some more cardi, then I've got some handmade oriental or Asian paper there. This is stitched round on the sewing machine, but the rest is all hand stitching. Little piece of paper tucked in there for interest. These are all Suffolk puffs with some twine inside, and similarly down here. This was another Suffolk puff, but instead of putting it with the gathers on the top, I've reversed it and put it face down so the gathers are underneath, and it gives a little bit of dimension. And then all I've done is stitch over the top with some French knots, bit of lace down at the bottom there on that one. This one, as you can see, it's on handmade oriental paper again, and then I've backed it onto some more caddy paper before I put the embroidery on top. To tie in with this paper in the background, I put a piece on here, again more Suffolk puffs, and in the centre I've just used these press stud tops. Little safety pins there, stitched all the way around on the machine, and then a couple of lines here and here of split back stitch before I went in to do the main embroidery. So C stitch and French knots down there, and then stem stitch, and then some fly stitch or feather stitch, never remember which is which. So this one is very much the same. Here I've done some turkey stitch inside the Suffolk puffs. I've couched down a piece of thread down there, and then the same layout really, handmade paper, machine stitching, couched my twigs down with some crosses, done a bit of running stitch up here, and then I've overlaid with crosses to pick up the blue on here, and the blue stitching I've done down there. So that's that one. Oh, I love these two. These I've done with Sue Spargo threads, and I wanted those coming out of my Suffolk puff. And to mimic these, I've done some more here, but whereas these are just left loose, I've couched them down and then put French knots in the middle, and they're just on a circle of fabric with split back stitch going all the way around to give it a bit of a border. And then as you can see, I've done some stitching here, French knots, a little bit of paper down the side there. This one I cut an aperture, as you can see, and then did blanket stitch all the way around. This is just some very fine organza fabric I had, and then I just embroidered a little flower seed on the top there. Here, this is just some of the same fabric, but I've torn it and twisted it before I stitched it down. And then these two, I wanted to use the same thread here and here, but I didn't have enough of this thread, so I've added some green here. So to pick it up, I've added green French knots up there and down here, so it kind of carries the colour theme through. This was a bit of lace that I had. This is some gorgeous handmade paper which has been embedded with little fibres like straw. More of the usual handmade Asian paper, and then I've done a green strip down here again to pick up the green there and the green here, and stitch that down with some invisible stitching. And then because there were holes here where this paper was bound into its journal or its book, I've just done 2 lines of running stitch just to hold it in place. Behind here is a twig again from the garden that I've wrapped in this twine. Because these two match, I wanted to have something here on this portion, but I didn't have anything really that would work, so I've just put this other little embroidery that I did. Not necessarily matchy, but it adds something to the page. It definitely needed something there. And then over the back, just this is vellum that I did some parallel lines of running stitch, inked around the edges. It's on a book page, and then just these 3 little individual embroideries I just added on. As you can see, my usual wrapped washer there, and rather than take the thread to the other side, I've just let it dangle there. There's some seed stitch there, French knots, more seed stitch, and then seed stitch around the outside there, French knots, little running stitches there. These are knots that I've done in a much thicker twine, so there's only 1 wrap of those, and then there's some more little details of running stitch behind there, and then just some parallel stitches just to hold the pieces together and give continuity between the 3. This one, it's just got a ruff of that paper there and there, running stitch there, seed stitch, more French knots. And then this was a piece that I did a while ago for the 52 tags that Anne Brooks was doing a couple of years ago. It was on a frame, like a weaving frame, if you will. And then I just wove paper fabric through, as you can see, book pages, various twines and threads and wools. Again, something I didn't really know what to do with, didn't like how it looked, couldn't think of a project that I could add it to until I was doing this. And then I decided to cut away the DIY weaving frame that I created and to glue the piece down onto this back cover. So there we go, that's these 2 little journals. I'll do some photographs of these embroideries inside this one as well for you. But quickly before I go, this is the journal that I've been working on for a while. I've showed you this one, absolutely love it, but it had, if you remember, sorry, it had 3 spare pages at the end. So 1 there, 1 there, and 1 there. I have been working on, and still am working on, the little embroideries that I'm going to put inside. So I'll be back with another video, probably about a week, maybe a fortnight at most, showing you the embroideries to go in here. And then I will probably call this journal finished, although there is plenty of room, as I've mentioned before, for me to add another signature in here. And I might well do that depending on what Elizabeth Degg does in the future, and whether or not I've got enough time to put any more in. So please watch out for that video coming up. I should mention that I've just got in here a piece of cordage that I made with a couple of scraps of fabric. I was watching a video done by Catherine, who is K3N on YouTube, and she was making cordage just by twizzling some pieces of fabric together. And as I say, I wanted to try it out. I did try it out, and this is the little piece that I got left. Don't want to throw it out, so I'm just going to use it as a little bookmark inside here, just to remind me in the future. Okay, so that's it, everybody. As I say, come and join me in a couple of weeks for those little finished embroideries, and in the meantime I'll leave you with photos of what's inside this journal. Until the next video, everybody, take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye now.